Hi, my name's Leanna and today we're going to show you how to do the focaccia. It's a topped focaccia, sometimes called Pizza Bianca, devised in a part of Rome in Italy. I'm going to start by making the focaccia dough. So to begin with, I've got 250 grams of strong bread flour in here. It's just white strong bread flour, and to that I'm going to add my yeast. I've got dried fast action yeast, which means that you don't have to put it in water first. Some yeasts you do have to put it in water. This one I can put it straight into the bowl with my flour. So I need 3 grams of that into there, which if you're using one of these sachets is just approximately half of the sachet, because these sachets are about 7 grams. So that goes into there. Then to add to that on the other side of my bowl, I'm going to put in, again, 4 grams of salt. And that's going to give my bread flavour. The other thing that salt does is it gives your bread a little makes it last a little longer. And it'll give it it helps strengthen what we call the gluten, which is in the protein in the flour. So that comes off the scales then. And I'm going to add to that 200 millilitres of warm water. So we could tend to call it tepid. So basically when you put your finger in, it's about the same temperature as you are. So you shouldn't be able to feel too warm or too cold. So you can weigh your water if it's easier, or you can just add it a little bit at a time. I've measured this, but I'm just going to add mine slowly. I'm going to use my fingers like a claw to mix it together. So I'm going to add it in there and then start to mix it together. It will become quite a wet dough. Don't worry about that. All we're going to do to begin with is get the dough together. So the mixture should be easily got together, but it should be sticky. It will stick to your hands, and that's absolutely fine. So once you've got your dough and you're happy that it's all, the flour and the yeast and the salt is all mixed together, then you can either use a dough scraper or a butter knife, a not sharp knife, or the back of a fork to scrape it off your fingers. And then I'm going to put this to one side to rest. You do need to cover it over, but it can be covered over loosely with a tea towel or just a plate, or what I'm going to cover mine with is just over the top. I've got another bowl that I'm going to put over there. I'm going to put that to the side for 10 minutes just to allow it to sit, to allow the flour to absorb the water. And then whilst I'm letting that sit, I'm going to go on to my next stage of preparing the sauce to go with my focaccia. Now what I'm going to do is make the sauce and prep my ingredients to top the focaccia. So my sauce is a tomato-based reduction sauce. So I'm going to start off by chopping my onion. I've got a red onion, but it doesn't have to be a red onion. I'm going to also, because this is a really large onion, I'm going to keep some of this for the top of the focaccia as well, because it'll give it a nice colour. So all I've done so far is cut off the tip. I'm then going to use the bridge to go down through the onion and then peel back the skin. So I'm just going to put this half to one side for now, peel back the skin, and then I'm going to slice it in a fan. So once I've got the skin off the onion, I'm then just going to use my knife, the point of my knife, to go down the onion like this. Nice and thin slices. The thinner you can get it, the better. So, because we want really nice small pieces. We would describe this as possibly brunoise chopping. It's what we would describe as 1 to 2 millimetre pieces. So really nice small pieces. I'm then using the claw grip just to chop in the other direction, just to get really nice small pieces of onion. So once I've chopped my onion, I'm then going to add to that preparing my tomatoes. So just ordinary salad tomatoes. These are actually from the School of Arts and Food garden. They've some nice tomatoes grown there. So I'm going to chop these again, and again I'm just going to go into small pieces. This is more roughly chopped, but as long as you're making sure that you're using that either bridge or claw grip, especially when you're using the claw grip, you're keeping your fingertips behind your knuckles. That's really important because you don't want to end up with fewer fingers. So once I've chopped my tomatoes, I'm then going to chop some garlic to add to it. Now I can chop my garlic or I can crush my garlic. It's up, doesn't really matter. So I've got a garlic bulb here, and we don't want the whole bulb. That would make the sauce too garlicky. So what I'm going to do is just get the bulb, and I'm going to lean on it, and you'll hear it crack. Then, if I get my finger, once it's cracked, whoo, nearly lost it, you should be able to get your pieces out, and then you just need a clove of garlic. So you don't need lots. These are quite big cloves, so you can use more than one clove if it's smaller. Because this is quite a big clove, I'm just going to use one. Once I've got my clove out, I'm then going to lean on it again, and you'll hear it crack. There we go, and that's releasing the skin from the clove of the garlic. So all I'm going to do then is use the top and the tail of my garlic, and then using my garlic press, I'm going to just prep my garlic ready to go into my mixture. We can also use some of this on top of our focaccia if we want. It depends on what flavours you want for your dish. So my garlic's ready and my ingredients are ready to go into my dip. Okay, so now my dough has rested for about 10 minutes. Now I need to knead it. Now there are a number of ways to knead bread. The way we're going to do it today is a pull and turn method. So I've got a dough scraper, but you don't need one. This just allows to get the dough from the outside of the bowl. So you could use a knife to do this, or even a really clean ruler would be fine as well. So if I take that out then, what I'm going to do now is, with one hand on the bowl, I'm going to grab some of my dough and press it back in. And just stretch it up and press it back in. And I'm going to do that approximately 10 times. So don't worry about it if you do it more than 10. Don't worry about it if you lose count at 8, it's fine. But once you've done it approximately 10 times, you should start to see your dough come in and come into a nice ball, and it should start to give you some resistance. So when you pull on it, when you're pushing it back in, it shouldn't pull quite as far, and that's the gluten starting to develop. So I'm happy with that now. Once my dough is, I've just done that 10 times, I'm then going to get my olive oil. So it's about 25 millilitres, or about 2 tablespoons, and I'm just going to drizzle it round the edge of my bowl into there. Then all I'm going to do again is return my larger bowl to the top and leave it to rest for a further 20 minutes this time. So I'm going to carry on making the sauce now. So I've got here a pan with a little oil in it. I'm going to add to that my onion. That's going to go in there, and I'm going to fry that off for a minute or so, just to soften and what we call sweat the onion, which means some of the water will come out of the onion. What we don't want too much of is colour on the onion, so you don't want it to brown too much at this stage. So if it is browning, either take it off the hob for a minute or turn down your hob. So as it's cooking, once it's cooked for a couple of minutes and started to soften, I'm then going to add in my tomato and my garlic. That can go in now. And then that's going to start to reduce. So as that's reducing, I'm going to add in some flavour. So I've got some sugar, that's going to help add to the sweetness. So I've got about a teaspoonful of sugar in there. I've got some salt. Now this is to taste, so I'm going to just do a large pinch of salt. I've got about a tablespoon of vinegar. This is actually red wine vinegar, but you could use balsamic vinegar, you could just use malt vinegar, it doesn't really matter. And then I've got some oregano and some basil. These are my herbs that I'm using. I'm again using about half a teaspoon of oregano, and the same with my basil. That's going to go in there. And I'm also going to add a small pinch of black pepper into there as well. And that is now starting to reduce down. So I've got it on a medium to low heat, and that's going to cook for about 10 minutes to start to reduce the tomatoes, so the tomatoes will become very soft, and it should start to get a really nice colour and flavour. So that's my sauce. So whilst that's cooking, I'm going to go back and re-knead my focaccia dough again. And then I should be able to show you how to put your toppings on, and it should come together. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is just re-knead the dough. So exactly the same process as we did last time with the pulling and folding. And then I'm going to put that to one side for approximately an hour to rise again. So with the oil will go in, that's fine. Pull, stretch, knead the dough in. Don't worry if the oil's making it slippy, that's fine. About 10 times again, just until the dough feels quite stretchy and it's coated in that nice olive oil. So that's now done. I'm going to put that to one side to prove for about an hour. So the last thing I'm going to do with my focaccia is I'm going to put it on the baking tray, put my toppings on, and then put it in the oven for about 25 minutes. So I've got my oven preheating to about 220 degrees, which is about gas mark 7. And that's going to preheat for just a few minutes to get it nice and warm. What I've also done in my oven is I've put an empty baking tray just with some water that I'm going to tip some water in. You don't need to do that, but it does give the crust just a crunchier texture to it. It's up to you whether you do that or not. It's not that important. So the next thing I'm going to do is just prepare my toppings. Now, you can put any toppings you like on the focaccia. I'm going to go for some thin slices of red onion, because I had some onion left over. It's always good to use up things you haven't. I also got some yellow tomatoes. You don't need to use yellow ones, you could use red ones. They just give a nice colour. And again, these were from the garden, and I'm just going to slice those up as well. So I've got some yellow tomatoes, and I've got some red pepper. With the focaccia, it's quite nice if you can get a variety of colours to it. But again, it's not necessary. It just gives a slightly more vibrant look to the end product. So with my pepper, I'm just going to take out the insides. And again, you can slice this however you want to slice it. I'm just going to cut off just a couple of nice round slices to add to the top of my focaccia, just like that. So I've got my onion, and the last thing I've got, last two things I've got some sun-dried tomatoes. So these are in oil. They give a really good flavour, and they're quite strong, so you don't need too many. I'm just going to slice those up to smaller pieces. Again, not necessary, just whatever you happen to have. You could put olives, you could put whatever, you could put some cooked meats on there. Depends on what you want to do. The last thing I've got to put on mine is I've got some mozzarella that I'm just going to tear on the top. So what I'm going to do with my dough, you can see it's nicely risen. It's got this really nice fluffy texture to it. So I'm just going to move this to one side for a moment, and I'm going to take my baking tray. So on my baking tray, I've got some greaseproof paper. You have to be quite careful with this. It can't be baking paper because baking paper will stick to your bread. But if you haven't got greaseproof paper, it's perfectly fine just to put on a baking tray with a bit of oil rubbed over. So what I'm going to do is just tip my focaccia on. I'm just using the dough scraper to get it out of the tin. But you don't have to use a dough scraper. And you can see the nice olive oil on there now. You can see that it's nicely risen. So all I'm going to do now is just take my fingertips and just gently stretch that, leaving these nice pressed fingertips in. So once I've got that to a reasonably nice shape, I'm then going to put my toppings on. So I'm going to sprinkle over my onion slices, then add to that, I think I'm going to add to that my pepper, my tomatoes. I'm just going to cut my pepper slices in half actually, just to give them a little bit more detail. Add my sun-dried tomatoes. You do have to be a little bit careful. If you put far too many ingredients on, you're going to impede the rise, so it's not going to rise up as much. So do make sure that you're not absolutely weighing it down. So think about how many you're putting on. And then lastly, all I'm going to do is just tear over a little bit of my mozzarella. Again, not too much, just for a bit of creaminess, and it gives it a little bit of protein just to enhance the dish. So that's there. Last thing I'm going to do to add to that, I've got some black pepper and a little bit of basil that I'm going to sprinkle over. This is dried basil. And I've also got some salt flakes. Again, just ordinary salt would be fine. Just be careful how much salt you use again, because especially if you're putting, you've got salt in the dough and you've got cheese on top. If you're using a salty cheese like a Parmesan, it's going to be too much of a salty dish. So that's going to go in there. Last thing I'm going to do is when I get it out, I've got some nice fresh basil leaves that I'm going to tear over the top just to finish it off, to give it a really nice flavour. I'm going to serve that with my dip. Right, to finish off our focaccia, all I'm going to do is just slice it, add some fresh basil leaves onto the top. These are optional, you won't have to add it, it just adds a nice pop of colour and it gives a really nice fragrance and just another look to the dish. I'm just going to slice it into reasonably good chunks. The inside should be nice and fluffy, should have this quite open texture. So you know that it's nicely risen and has got a nice flavour to it. So once I've sliced it, I'm going to add it to a plate with, some of my basil fell off, add it to my plate, adding my sauce to a bowl to dip, and then just drizzling, back on there, just drizzling over a tiny little bit of olive oil just to finish it off. And there we have our topped focaccia with our reduced tomato dip.